Hello, world, and welcome to Movies Are Boring. This is the periodic show where two defense journalists sit and talk about the movies. Today, we are going to talk about Jarhead 2 Fields of Fire. Yes, Hollywood made a sequel to Jarhead. If you don't remember, Jarhead was the 2005 film starring Jake Gyllenhaal, directed by Sam Mendes, who is also known for such classics as American Beauty and Road to Perdition. Jarhead 2, Fields of Fire, is the 2014 direct-to-video release directed by Don Michael Paul, whose previous credits include a direct-to-TV Taken sequel and a direct-to-TV Lake Placid sequel. So I think you understand the quality of film that we're dealing with here. Kevin, how did you find Jarhead 2, Fields of Fire? I know that you were live tweeting it while you were watching.
I was. And I'm going to say this, actually, about the movie. It is not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
I agree.
Now, that being said, that's kind of like saying stepping on that rusty nail wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. But this was not really quite as bad as I thought it was going to be, and it certainly could have been worse. That said, this was not good.
It's interesting. Let me ask you, if this movie had not been called Jarhead 2,
I think it would have really worked in its favor had it not done that. It still would have had a lot of the flaws that it had, but I think this was a really poor branding decision on Universal's part.
I agree. Just to remind everybody, Jarhead, the original one from 2005, is based on a memoir, the soldier fighting in the first Persian Gulf War. A Marine, I apologize, a Marine, fighting in the first Persian Gulf War. And it's kind of his very thoughtful, introspective, almost cynical take. The memoir was pretty popular at the time. This American Life was just getting started, and they read segments of it on the air. It's a pretty powerful and kind of sad and a little bit jaded look at our military. Jarhead 2 is just an action flick. It has no real connection other than name and a couple of little drops and things in the sequel that kind of reference the first one kind of thematically a little bit.
You mean the overwrought monologues?
Yeah, there are opening and closing
Monologues
that are very overwrought, and the Dear John letter conversation as well, kind of in the midway, which I feel like they just shoehorned in. All the stuff that makes it a Jarhead movie feels very shoehorned in. I really feel like somebody probably wrote like a pretty decent action flick, and then Universal said, you know what, let's say that this is Jarhead 2, and we'll see if we can get some bucks out of it.
That's absolutely what it feels like, and I just scripts happen like this all the time, and that's what they do. They attach it to another franchise just because they've got it lying around, and they think that it'll increase sales. I don't know why they thought that was the case here.
Yeah, that's funny because I looked at the box office records for Jarhead, the original one. It didn't make its money back in America. When it went to international, it just barely made its budget back. So why throw Jarhead? Why throw that title on here? It doesn't. It's kind of strange.
We'll probably never know.
You're probably right. Not a lot of people are going to see this film.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's a good segue for us to talk about the film itself.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So you were. I know that you were particularly. There's a lot of obvious. It's an action movie. Like it's a don't think about it too much action movie. Basically, this guy gets put in charge of his squad. That's correct, right? His squad, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and they just transport supplies, and they're supposed to transport some supplies in Afghanistan. Things go awry. They end up meeting up with a special forces soldier, and they have to transport basically the Afghani version of Malala, sorry. That's right. That's essentially
kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit different, but yeah. Well, it's a lot different because Jarhead 2. But yeah, continue.
and it's their journey as they're bonding as teammates, losing people, and trying to get this woman out of Afghanistan so she can go and continue to do her good work for the country of Afghanistan. And it's an action movie essentially, and it's not a terrible action movie actually.
I don't know.
It's not a good movie, but
Right.
it's just like if you were to turn this on TBS on a Sunday, you weren't feeling good or something, and you just caught an action flick, this is passable, I think.
I think it is. I think a lot of actually I kind of liked the character dynamics in it. I mean, I thought the dialogue was written very
I
badly, but I thought the cast had more like better chemistry as a squad than I thought they would.
I did too. I was kind of surprised, you know.
Um, I mean, other than they have a more casual relationship with their commanding officer than I think your general junior enlisted Marine probably would.
Oh, absolutely. You know,
Yeah, Stephen Lang is apparently just the best commander ever. Like, hey, son, you want a beer? I know it's against the rules, but don't worry about it.
and with a big, huge frown on his face the entire time too.
Yeah, let's talk about Stephen Lang just briefly.
Okay,
Man, I really wish he was in better movies. I
so
wish he would find something from him.
explain who Stephen Lang is and who his character is in this film.
Well, you may remember Stephen Lang as Scowling Marine from Avatar. Scowling Angry Marine from that movie. In this movie, he is the highest paid actor in the cast and fulfills the role of the group's commanding officer, Major. I don't know his name because it doesn't matter. Major Scowling Marine.
Right.
And he's very gruff, but he's an officer who cares. And I can't really keep explaining this. It's the cliche parade.
Right, but basically, like they get lost. They're off the grid. The satellites can't find them, and so like action sequence of the Marines traveling, and then cut back to Stephen Lang. We gotta find them. We can't we've got all these satellites up in the air, and we can't scowl. But I'm really concerned actually.
It is. I was thinking about that right up until right as that scene happened. Like, do they not have helicopters? Do they not have like this is impossible. This wouldn't happen. And then it cuts directly to him saying, "This is impossible. How could this happen?" Well, at least you made the effort to kind of explain this.
Well, there was a lot of lazy stuff like that in the movie where I felt like they looked at this thing and were like, okay, well, if this situation happened, it would make all these other ramifications. Like, a good example of that is they've got a female in their squad, right? And so immediately you're thinking a bunch of male Marines and a female in the squad, there's going to be some sexual tension. And there's even a moment at the very beginning where the male lead and her kind of talk, and you're like, uh-oh, there's something going on. And then, like, 2 beats later, oh, she's a lesbian, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. Right? There's a lot of like very easy outs that they pick to kind of cover their plot holes and their logical inconsistencies in the movie. Again, didn't ruin it for me.
Yeah, well, actually, that didn't really ruin it. Are
you there?
Still there?
Yeah, you cut out a little bit. We're back.
Okay. People who don't know this stuff wouldn't notice it, but it's just her ponytail just is something I couldn't get over because that is not regulation. I mean, I know, I could. We're not going to go into all the not regulation things, like not completely accurate things, because that would take literally this whole cast.
We would be here all day.
Yeah, we would be here literally all day, probably all of tomorrow too, if I point out everything, but. It was one of those day one things, like that should be a bun. That's not regulation. Ponytail doesn't work. But other than that, they actually, I think, they had just the right level of, I'm just going to call it, and I hate saying this, playful sexual harassment there.
Right.
I think, that was actually something that I did find believable. Her position in the squad and how they interacted, and how they were able to respect her as a teammate, but also be the sort of raunchy,
they
disgusting,
they were
miserable,
still,
enlisted men
yeah,
that
they
they
were still
are.
allowed to be like terrible, not terrible, but guys. They were guys. They're guys in their
Yeah.
20s, right? You know.
Right. So in that actually I did find believable, and I mean I think that goes more to the cast than to the writers probably.
Yeah.
Um, and one thing that I actually did find interesting was the notion that they were support pogues basically.
Uh-huh.
This wasn't a combat unit, and that's something that you don't actually get in a lot of these movies because usually when you get these straight to DVD movies like this, it's always the elite squad.
Yes.
And they tell you right off the bat, like they're not the elite squad. They're kind of good at what they do. Like they're not exemplary, but they're just some dudes.
Yeah, and I mean,
Um,
basically, the opening scene is them kind of getting shot to hell while they're trying to unload supplies. You know,
right.
and it's super violent as well. Which I don't. Did you watch the rated or the unrated version?
Oh, I watched the unrated version.
Okay, so I was kind of, I guess, in the first few minutes, you see that guy's leg get just blown off. Um, and,
Yeah.
and that was kind of a trend that continued. Basically, anytime you see any kind of explosive device in this movie, um, it's going to get used almost immediately, and it's going to be an epic and disgusting explosion. Um, am I right?
Oh, you were right. This was Explosion, the movie.
And I kind of appreciated it for that. Like, I felt like I got my money. It's really weird that this was kind of a satisfying film to me, in a lot of ways. If it just had not been called Jarhead 2, I think it would have been a passable action flick. And there's something interesting about that to me too, though, because this is the first time I feel like I've seen an action movie set in Afghanistan or in any of the current wars that was just like, this is just an action movie, just turn your brain off, enjoy yourself, and it kind of worked, I think. And are we that far away enough from the start of this war that we can start enjoying like rote action movies that are set in it?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
mean, not for me really. I mean, the idea that because you need to remember first of all, and we need to just really bring it home. And we are doing this on the anniversary of September 11th. It wasn't really planned that way. We're still in Afghanistan.
We are.
Like
It's
this war,
13 years on, and we are still there. Yeah.
yeah. This war is still going on. I was just talking to one of my friends the other day about the troop withdrawal deadline, and he said like I'll believe it when I'm home. Um, because I mean I don't know. I don't think anyone really knows. But like with a movie like this, and it wasn't wildly offensive
No,
either.
that it
Like
wasn't.
it's not. I mean there are moments that are just really really dumb. And I like I want to talk a little bit about that Navy SEAL. Um,
Absolutely.
he is the worst SEAL ever.
Why is he the worst SEAL ever?
Because most of it, like, pretty much most of his ideas are wrong. Can we talk? And we were joking a little bit about this being Star Wars in Afghanistan, and I told you just wait until they turn off the targeting computer.
Right. There's a lot of, if you watch this film, and you know what, maybe you should. It's one of the only things that we've watched that I would tentatively recommend. Any of the bad things we've watched that I would tentatively recommend. Think about Star Wars while you're watching it. There's a lot of bizarre parallels of which Kevin is about to elaborate on now.
Yeah. And yeah, this scene makes no sense at all. It's the scene where they abandon their rifles so they can move
So
faster.
they're beset by snipers. They're caught in a field. That's the scene you're talking about, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I actually don't even remember their justification for why. I assume it was to move faster or be less encumbered. But they
It
abandoned
was
their rifles.
stealthy. It was stealthy somehow. So
Yeah, so they give the rest of the team their rifles and their firearms so they can go sneak up on the Taliban and stab them. and it doesn't make any sense at all. It really doesn't. The closest thing I could think of that would maybe make sense, something like that, is don't give up your rifles, give up your really heavy armored vests,
Yeah,
because that's something people have actually done before. Operators have done that, have just decided the vest is too heavy, it's going to slow me down. I'm going to put this here and then go up and behind them that way. Their weapons that they use to defend themselves, and they go kill them with rocks.
yeah.
They,
The
one of
special
the Marine literally beats one of them to death
no,
with
the
a
special
rock.
forces guy still had his knife, but yeah, the Marine, yeah, the rock scene. Jesus.
That was really, really, really stupid.
There's a lot of really, really stupid moments in this film. Um, but I can't, like, again, I can't feel like I can judge it too harshly. I just felt like I was watching any other
Right.
bad action movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we are watching Jarhead 2. What do you want from it?
Why did they call it Fields of Fire, by the way?
Um, I don't know. I
Yeah,
think.
I don't think they ever said that in the. There's a subtitle of the movie, Jarhead 2: Fields of Fire. I don't think they ever said why it was called Fields of
I mean,
Fire.
Fields of Fire is a military jargon term, and I think they were just doing that to be like, hey, it's another military movie.
Yeah, it was, and it was interesting. A lot of the way it was shot felt like I was watching any one of these like Corindal or Restrepo. It felt very like one of those documentaries uh, that have come out uh, about these wars, but with hyperviolence inserted into it that you don't really see in those.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of interesting too. Do you know the lead in this is actually a former Army Ranger?
I did not.
He did 3 tours in Afghanistan and one in Iraq before turning to a film career.
Huh.
Yeah, I thought
I
that was
would,
kind of.
man, I would love to pick his brain on this. I would
Oh
love to know
yeah,
how he felt about making this movie.
you got to eat, you know, if
You
you're an
do.
actor.
Yeah, and that's what we said about Stephen Lang too, and everybody in this movie. They all got to eat. Uh, one last thing I want to bring it to, and actually this was one of the things that also kind of surprised me, though again very flawed, and that's the depiction of Afghans in this movie, because
Yeah,
they actually have principal Afghan characters, which to its credit is kind of new for movies about these conflicts. They're usually kind of window dressing.
I agree. They had two that I can think of that were two Afghan characters that were kind of well-rounded, as well-rounded as anyone's going to be in this film.
Right.
Not really one note, and yeah, like it never felt. I never felt really offended by this movie,
Right.
other than my intelligence, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they have the Afghan private who's hastily attached to their squad at the last minute, who seems far more well trained than like. I mean, there were a lot of just like that seems unlikely to me moments in terms of his knowledge of things and the amount of training that he's received.
Right.
Which I mean could have easily been fixed by giving him like a higher rank or something, but I didn't know. I don't get to make these calls.
So
Um, oh,
go ahead.
you were
Sorry.
gonna say something? No, you go ahead.
Would you recommend Jarhead 2 to people?
No,
No, just straight no.
no, I wouldn't. Not really. I mean, maybe if it was on Netflix or something, and you were just like really bored, or like you said, if it came on TNT or something while you were homesick, like you could do that. But I spent $20 on the DVD
Jesus.
just to get it.
Did you watch you
Sorry,
watched the deleted scenes, right?
I did.
What was in the
Um,
deleted scenes? I didn't see those.
Really nothing. Well, one thing that was, it actually was an interesting scene. It was them at the range shooting, and this is the one moment where they were using their weapons properly, at least one of them. It was the female Marine shooting in short, controlled bursts and in single rounds, and somebody nearby shooting wildly.
Of course.
And her explaining that and of course she explains that it's like, that's the problem with men. They want immediate gratification and can't take their time. And of course they had to make it sexual. But,
right.
you know, it was the one time where they were using their weapons properly. And then they go to the rest of the movie and they proceed to never use their weapons properly again and just shoot wildly with no regard for how much ammo they may have.
Well, they kind of they pay lip service to that, but they always have enough to get through until the very end, very, very end.
Oh, yeah, at the inconspicuous Taliban hideout.
Yes, oh Jesus. Oh, there was a lot of really dumb stuff in this Then, like, as they ride off into the sunset and the weird, cynical, Jarhead-like monologue begins to play,
then cut to credits with rap metal music.
Yeah, the soundtrack was so off-putting for the whole film. It was like lots of rap metal, lots of new metal, all that kind of stuff. Just not super great. You know what? I will say though that I would recommend this film. There's something about it that I think is very interesting, because I do think I think it's interesting that this movie got made, and that it's the first kind of, I wouldn't call apolitical, feels like the wrong word, but I feel like a lot of the movies that have been made about this conflict have very clear messages. And are very messagey, and this one's not. It's just a rote action movie, and this is the first one I've seen that's like that, and I think that's just very interesting to me. I think it's really in poor taste, like you said, because again, we are still there, and people are still dying.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but like I said, not like this movie wasn't made in terrible taste. I mean, at least not by I think the marketing and the way that it was just slapped on as Jarhead 2, and just how little care the marketing department put into it, that's a little bit troubling. But I mean, I think the people who actually worked on the movie put some care into it, even if it wasn't the most competently made film I've ever seen.
Yeah. It's probably the best thing that the director of the Lake Placid sequels is ever going to do, I would imagine.
This is his masterpiece.
This is his masterpiece.
Indeed.
His next movie is Sniper Legacy. So
with Tom Berenger.
Oof. Oh,
well, Tom Berenger. He is the guy from the Sniper franchise. That actually would be a fun franchise for us to dip into again.
I've never seen any of those, actually. Do you want to?
The first one's interesting. I mean, it's just kind of another one. I don't remember if it was 80s or 90s, actually, now that I think about it. But, it was... He was kind of reprising his role from Platoon, but, less violent and racist and more likable.
What do you want to do next?
I don't know. Let's just kind of let this sit where it is and make a decision in a day or two.
All right. You want to process? You're still processing Jarhead 2?
Yeah, it was deep, man.
It was so deep, and so Jarheady. All right, guys. Well, that is it for Movies Are Boring. My name is Matthew Galt. With me, as always, is Kevin Nodell, the man with the beard. We are signing off, and we will see you next time. Say goodbye, Kevin.
All right.